Hi, friends. We're back in the podcast studio with our bright yellow background. It's like Sesame Street here.
Yeah, that's it. We are
We
in the bat cave.
yeah, and we just had we did a morning coffee together.
Human bean.
Yeah, Bruce and I
Human bean.
hung out.
What a catchy name for a
Went to
coffee
the Human
shop.
Bean. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're not human until you've had your coffee.
How
in
was the
morning.
coffee?
Publicly, I'm going to say it's not the best coffee I've ever had.
You can say that publicly.
Yeah,
Huh?
sorry if you're a Human Bean employee. No slight on you, but
Yeah. You were also dissing their display case of breakfast sandwiches.
well, there were
too.
sausage sandwiches that look. Come on, they've been there probably a week.
And there's got to be wax ones or something.
Something.
I
Yeah,
don't think
made of
that was their
clay.
actual breakfast sandwiches.
Yeah,
Like they were.
and the thought of microwaving it to bring it back to life. I don't know. My mom would spank me for
Your mom would
eating that
spank
stuff. What is wrong with you?
Man, what I wouldn't give. If I had a time machine, that might be my first stop, just to go back to Chicago and see your mom spank you. That would be so much fun. What a little rascal Bruce looked
I
like.
was a rascal, I'm
Yeah, I bet
sorry
you
to
were.
say. My mom, though, she would outlast me. She was tough.
Yeah, that's the trick to parenting, is you just have to be more stubborn than your kids. You have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to win. You have to win. You love them, obviously. You love and love and love them, but you can't.
Yeah.
You can't. You can't give in to please, 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 please. Like you got to hold your line.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that was a different world, wasn't it? We talked about that a little bit last week about the power of mom's influence, but
Yeah.
it was this. Yeah, they would outlast you. I don't
Yep.
want what you put before me. Well, there's nothing between you and bedtime except that plate of food. So if you want to eat something, that's going to be sitting there all
You
night.
just saran wrap it, put in the fridge, and you'll have it for breakfast.
Yeah, and it was sitting there, and then sooner or later I'd go eat it because I was so hungry and I knew I couldn't win. So
No, you can't.
I don't know if that flies today. I don't know if that fits in the current parenting
I don't
manual.
know either, but I remember Trisha and I. We always said like, "There's no kid that could beat us." Like it doesn't. I mean, we'll draw a line. If you cross that line, we'll bring you back over it. You cross it, we'll bring you back over. You cross it, we'll bring you back over it. We're going to keep you in here. We're going to keep you at this. And then we had one little girl who both of us, after quite a while, were like, maybe we can't be beat. Like, maybe we were wrong. Maybe we're not as tough as we thought we were. But we did.
Yeah.
We loved that girl so much. She's one of our little foster daughters. Loved her so much. And we were determined, like, no, we can't let her be that kid that, is just, falls into trouble. We're going to outlast her. We're going to outlove her. We're going to not let her stubbornness, win. So,
Yeah, and then that's a secret perseverance. And not perseverance for stubbornness' sake. There's a big difference between those two things, but
Yep.
to a principle that you believe is going to produce life later on down the road.
Yeah.
So don't give up.
So partly our coffee sitting down together this morning was just about the future and dreaming and, what does God want? And we're not going to lay all that out here, what maybe we feel like God is saying, but maybe we can talk about that, the idea of the future and dreaming and hearing the voice of God and trying to walk in faith to what we think he's saying. What does that look like? Because I think both of us, that's the way we were trained. That's the way we were discipled.
Yeah.
Godly men and women came around us and kind of taught us to hear God's voice and taught us, just from example too, like they were hearing something from God and it was almost always bigger than you want it to be, a little scary big.
Yeah.
If that makes sense,
Yeah.
it was big enough that it had to be God. Like, well, I didn't just think this up because I'm not sure I even want to do this,
Right.
But then kind of recruit us into it. Why don't you do this with me? If this is God, how could we fail?
Yeah, and the adventure of that, right? We were talking this week, Jason and I, with some pastors about that passage of Scripture in Ephesians, where Paul prays for the church in Ephesians 3:19. He said, even that whole chapter 3, he's praying that you'd have the strength to grasp together with all the saints what is the breadth and the length and the height and the depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge. And then he sort of gives you this destiny in order that you may be filled up to all the fullness of God. Just that passage. So there's this fullness that he sets out before him. Like, You don't have it yet, but you can. It's attainable. There's more. There's more. There's more.
Yeah.
There's a fullness that you should strive for. And I think it's, he talks about love. He talks about understanding. He talks about different things. But I just think that sometimes I think as believers we settle. Maybe do we settle for less? Like, well, I'm good. I'm good. He delivered me from my addictions, or I got my job, my dream job, or my dream family. But there's always this more that's out on the horizon. That's the fullness.
Yeah, we've talked a lot, you and I, over the years about pioneers and being pioneering, what that looks like, and that there almost is a personality around it too. Isn't that fair to say? Like there's a little bit of personality. Like there's guys that whether they were in the kingdom or out of the kingdom, they'd be starting a business.
Yeah, entrepreneurial spirit.
They would be making a fortune and losing a fortune and making another fortune.
Yeah.
And there's kind of that pioneer piece. And then there are settlers. And you need pioneers, but you need settlers too. And I don't mean settling for less. Like there's settling for less.
Yeah.
But there's people that come in after the pioneers and say, "Hey, you cut the brush down. You cleared a clearing. Now we're going to build a general store, and we're going to build a home, and we're going to stay here, and we're going to occupy this land."
Yeah, they bring stability.
Yeah, and both of those are good things. But I think what we're talking about, and maybe what Paul was and who he'd like to recruit, seem to be the pioneers.
Yeah.
Like, come with me where the gospel has not been preached. Let's go where Christ has not yet been named and believed, and let's share the gospel there.
And don't you think too, though, that he's not just it's not just a task, but it's it's a destination in God kind of a thing, because that next verse in verse 20 says, "Now to him who's able to do exceedingly and abundantly above all that we could ask, think, or imagine, according to him be glory in the church, according to the power that's in us, to him be glory in the church." And so somehow, even for the church, there's this last weekend, by the time you listen to this, we'll have spoken on this idea of breakthrough.
Yeah.
Breakthrough meaning, hey, I'm going to go beyond the barriers that have been set up. I'm gonna go beyond what I thought were my limitations. I'm going to know God in a deeper way.
Yeah, kind of reference the Wesley brothers.
Yeah,
who were hungry for something. They knew something in their heart was settling, not like settling the land and taming the land, but they were settling for less.
Yeah.
They saw something in Scripture that they knew they didn't have.
Yeah, they sensed it, right?
And they were hungry enough to get together with other guys and pray about it, but they weren't aware enough to even know exactly what they were looking for. But then when they saw it in one of their friends who had a breakthrough, he's like, "My friend got it. My friend got it. I still want it. But my friend got it."
Yeah. I mean, what do you think of that passage in Philippians where Paul said, "Brothers, I have not yet attained, but I press on for what Christ has called me." I forget the things that are behind, and I press on. What was he pressing on for?
Great question, man. If Paul didn't attain it,
then,
right? If you can be as accomplished as Paul, and at Philippians and in jail cell still say, "I haven't got it yet."
Yeah.
I think that reminds me of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus, "Blessed are they which hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled." But it's the cycle of hungry and thirsty and filled, and hungry and thirsty and filled, the way he made us. Like we're made to be hungry and thirsty. Because I'm not quite had what I'm looking for. I'm still, not just in the U2 sense, I still haven't found what I'm looking for, like they say.
Right.
But there is something like, there's something more than I have. There's a deeper. Isn't that just a function, though, of serving an infinite God? That if I'm really serving an infinite God, then I should always feel like there's more than I have. There's more than I don't know.
Yeah.
There's more.
But hasn't that always been the mark, to some degree, of revival in a personal level, but also in a corporate level? There's a group of people, or there's persons that say there's got to be more. I mean, the people that have impacted our lives, whether they were missionaries or maybe they were passive mentors like the A.W. Tozers or the Finneys or the Jonathan Edwards, who they saw something, or they were hungry for something that the people around them were like, wait, what do you see that I don't see? What are you hungering
Yeah.
for that I don't have?
Yeah, we've talked about it being two things before, like a holy ambition and a holy discontent.
Yeah.
Like both of them, like a holy version of those things. Because there can be
Right.
an unholy ambition, there can be an unholy discontent.
Yeah.
But when it's holy, there's an ambition for, like, man, this worship last night was great, but there's more.
yeah.
There's just a little bit more that we didn't press into, and you can even like, I should have been on my knees, right? And there's a feeling sometimes like, there's more, or even for God, for His name, like there really is more people that aren't worshiping Him that should be worshiping Him. But then that holy discontentment too. I'm just not quite happy with this. There's a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna just say that's good enough when
Yeah.
it comes to the kingdom. Like that's good enough. Like I feel like we've done enough.
You listen to the language of Psalms and all the psalmists. I mean, I was thinking while you were talking of that passage where he says, "As the deer pants for the waters, so my soul longs after you. I hunger and thirst." Jesus said too, right? Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness and so forth. So there's this hunger is part of who we are. I mean, we go through life as individuals paying attention to all kinds of hungers. We have a love hunger. We have my stomach is growling hunger. We have, a self-image hunger. I want to be significant. But it seems like Scripture is always pointing us to something bigger, like that passage in Ephesians. Like, man, there's a God who's beyond what we can imagine or what we can think.
Yeah, and then there's also the truth that godliness with contentment is great gain.
Right. So it's both sides.
There's some sort of a balance there of, God, I want to be hungry for what you want, and I believe, since He taught us to pray, your kingdom come, your will be done, that until that is perfected, there should be a certain amount of discontent. Our prayers should hold a certain amount of, come on, a little bit more kingdom in here, a little bit more of your will in here, a little bit more, that in my own life, like, forgive me my debts, give me my daily bread. There's a need in me, but there's also a need I see out here. And so I think this side of His return, this side of His complete lordship and every knee bow, every tongue confess, we ought to feel a certain discontent and a certain contentment, some kind of a balance there. I'm probably not expressing myself
No,
well.
it's good though. I mean, I think it's a great idea. If you pull on that thread a little bit, don't you think that, when your kids are younger, if they stopped eating, you were worried, right? You're like, something's wrong. Why don't you have an appetite?
Right.
But their constant appetite, not constant in the sense that they were always hungry, but they would always come back to hungry. Well, that was a sign of health. Their bodies were growing. It had just burned up all the fuel. By 11 o'clock, they burned up all the fuel they ate at 9 o'clock, and they needed to eat again. I was just talking to somebody in our church that has several boys, and she said they eat nonstop. I just get done feeding them, they're back 30 minutes later saying, "I'm hungry." And at first I thought, you can't be, and I realized no, they are. But that's a sign of health, right? That I'm hungry. And again, back to the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said there's a certain blessedness there, but there is also the rhythm, I guess, is what I'm describing is right. Okay, I ate, I'm content with that. But man, all of a sudden it stirred again in me. Something stirred. And I'm talking physically, but isn't there a spiritual kind of a counterpart to that where you're like, oh, the psalmist, I won't be satisfied until I see your face.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as pastors, there's a part of that I see that in people, and there's an appreciation for it. I have an appreciation for people that are seeking. They're seeking and they're not quite. And then there's also on a flip side, there's a piece where sometimes I want to ask people, like, are you ever gonna, like, is every community gonna be too imperfect for you? Are you gonna look for it somewhere? Like, are you looking for this thing in the right place?
Yeah.
Are you looking like, that life group really disappointed me, and well, the next one probably will too. The next one probably will too. But I appreciate a hunger but I've also seen people that kind of try to chase revival You know what I
Right.
mean? Like
Yeah.
well, I heard something's happening over here, then I heard something's happening over there, and they don't settle down into it and seek it, where they're at.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what that. It's an open question in my mind sometimes. I think with God, like what does that happen? Because sometimes I see people like that. I'm like, there's an amazing quality in you that I love, but also, who are you going to commit to? Like, which project are you going to commit to and stop and build?
Yeah.
Really build this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the mark, so to speak, of if a healthy community, I think, is made up of people who have agreed that, hey, we're all incomplete,
Yeah.
or we're broken in some way, or incomplete's maybe a better word, that no one has arrived, and we're on this journey together. And so I'm going to commit to this. I'm
Yeah.
like you. Sometimes I'm like, listen, if it's not our church, pick one, but find a place, a community that you can
Yeah.
both bond with and serve, and then in a sense to be ministered to, and then grow together,
Yeah.
and seek and encourage one another towards good works and so forth. And so I think there's something to be said for that,
Yeah.
like you said, that hunger, but also that finding a place.
Yeah, it's a lot like marriage or finding a spouse. We've talked to those guys who are like, dude, you're pushing your late 30s now, and you've dated every good girl that I know. Pick one, commit to her for the rest of your life.
And start to walk it out.
Yeah, walk it out. Right. Like, that one didn't really like the same style of music that I like. Really?
Yeah.
You'll find after a few years of marriage that's the least of your worries.
Right.
Like, that is.
Whether we like Brussels sprouts or
Yeah,
not.
that is not going to be. Well, I don't. She likes to hike, and I'm more of a get on the water kind of guy. Like, I don't think you're. I think you're looking for something that you're not going to find. You're just afraid of commitment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a piece that, okay, now commit to the dream. If he's able to do abundantly more than we can ask, that we can even think up in our head, that we could dream up, or we could imagine, if he can do so much more, then pick a dream in a way. Pick one.
Right.
And go for it.
And walk it out.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Don't just bounce from one to the next. Like, what is the thing that God would have, what's the dream that God would put in your heart, and that you would go for it?
Yeah.
I'm watching this guy right now. He's not a believer as far as I know. He showed up on social media. He came through a media feed. Sailing with Phoenix is his handle, right? At Sailing with Phoenix.
Sailing with Phoenix.
Sailing with Phoenix. And he says, I'm so dumb, I'm dyslexic. I misspelled it. It's so he did. It was kind of funny. But he's from Oregon, and he worked at Discount Tire Corporate. He's a Discount Tire corporate guy, and showed him in his Discount Tire polo shirt, and clean cut hair, and he got a diagnosis that his had a serious back issue, that something about his back, that it could just happen one day and he's paralyzed. Something about the connective tissues or the way it works together, and he realized, like, this could just happen to me, and there doesn't seem to be much that I can do about it, and I hate my job. He quit his job. He cashed in his 401k, and he bought a sailing boat, and he's sailing to Hawaii.
Yeah.
And now, like, he got thousands of people watching him.
I read about this.
Because he put like 70 miles on his boat to learn how to do it, and now he's just sailing to Hawaii solo with a cat. That's why it's called Sailing with Phoenix.
Yeah.
I think the cat's name
that's
is
made
Phoenix.
the news feeds. Yeah.
It's made the news. It's kind of fascinating. Like, if it shows up again on my feed, I always stop. I'm like, oh, let's see how he's doing. Let's see if he's still alive, But he kind of just had this dream and committed to it. Now, that has captured everyone's imagination because, man, he's a young guy. How's he going to survive after this? How's he going to live? And of course, now he's got all these followers. He's going to make a bunch of money on TikTok and Instagram and all that. I don't know if they'll get rich or not, but he'll survive, right? But he cashed it all in, and he bought a boat, and he sailed off into the sunset, literally. And people are following along on this journey. And he's kind of a funny, awkward dude too. Like, he's not really cut out for social media.
Right.
He's not terribly good at it. What has captured people's imagination is that he's just a normal guy doing something extraordinary.
Did it. Yeah. Yeah.
And we were just talking about how Mission Adventures, which is a work of Youth with a Mission, where they do short-term outreach geared towards high schoolers, that their theme this year is leave your nets.
Yeah.
Because the disciples kind of did the opposite. They had boats, sold them, and started following Jesus. Their corporation was, well, we're fishermen.
We're fishermen.
You know, some of the disciples.
Family business.
Yeah, we're fishermen. This is what we do. But then they saw something in Jesus, and they realized, like, man, I've got this condition. I've got the sin condition, and fishing's not going to fix it. I've got to do something, and I've only got one life to live, and I think this might be the Messiah. And they walked away from their nets.
Yeah,
and they started following him.
Left everything behind.
Yeah,
It reminds me of the passage in Hebrews where it says, "Without faith, it's impossible to please God. For he that comes to God must first of all believe that he exists." But then the second half of the verse is the
rewarder.
intriguing piece, and that he's a rewarder of those who diligently seek him.
yeah,
So that seek him is like this this progressive tense. It's okay. Well, I sought him once, and I'm done. But no, it seems to give the idea that continually are seeking him. So we're back to this earlier part of the conversation. So something provokes that. Without faith, what does it mean? So maybe the question is, well, what does it mean when we're challenged to live by faith? You know, for the disciples, in the scenario you just mentioned, like they were running the family business, they were probably making a living, feeding their families, doing their thing, and all of a sudden this totally new factor comes into play in the person of Jesus, and Jesus challenges them and says, "Come follow me."
yeah,
And now he didn't say you have to leave everything behind and never speak to your parents again. He put it out in front of them, "Hey, come follow me." So there was the invitation or the challenge but there was the unknown, right?
Yeah.
And so they did. Their response was they looked at what they had, and they couldn't do both. They couldn't stay there and be family fishermen and follow Jesus. So they made a decision.
Yeah.
I'm going to follow him. Don't you think that's kind of part of our lives all across the board to some degree, that even the little things that God asks us to do,
yeah,
there's a decision that has to be made. I can't hold on to both. I have to let go of one, like the trapeze illustration. I have to let go of this one in order to grab the bar that's coming towards me.
Yeah.
But that's the faith element, because we don't know what the other bar holds, right?
So I let go of a job. It wasn't a career, but it was a job, and it was a good job.
Paying the bills.
I was paying the bills with being a garbage man. I bought my first home. You know, I'm old enough that the price sounds ridiculous now. I think I bought it for $63,000.
Right.
2.5
Should've bought
kind of
two.
bedroom. I thought it was the most money in the whole world when I signed the mortgage on it. And we had a dog. And I quit my job. We sold our house. We packed our belongings into a Chevy Celebrity, like a 1982 Chevy, something like that. Maybe 85, something, Chevy Celebrity. And we drove across the country to get training to be missionaries.
Yeah.
Well, what did you, I just out of curiosity, that's kind of my story. There's a lot more to it, but that's my story. And everyone thought we were crazy, and we thought we were crazy. Like, who does this?
Yeah.
Like, there
was an element of unknown.
And there's no pay involved in
Yeah.
it. It was, you're going to pay us to be missionaries.
You can't see the payoff in the future.
What did you?
Similar
did you
story,
catch
right?
on?
I mean, I was had a small business, a construction business, and had a wife. We were relatively newly married, had a 2-year-old, and one day we heard that call. We listened to a group of people that were doing something that we couldn't truly wrap our minds around. They were missionaries.
Yeah.
And how they got there and what they were doing, but there was something in it that we sensed the urging or the nudge of God, come follow me in this. And we realized this is it. Now, again, in that moment, we had no idea where it was going to take us. I remember talking to my dad, my father, who was a very responsible, 9 to 5, 8 to 5 guy, saying, yeah, we're going to go I think we're going to go pursue a missionary career. And I remember his second question was, well, how much does that pay you?
Yeah.
And I said, well, actually, there is no money in it yet. We got to raise our own support, that kind of a thing. And I just remember the look on his face was totally beyond his ability to wrap his mind around.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the answers either, but this is what we're after here right now, right? Is that if God has said that without faith it's impossible to please him, Is that just is this scenario that work for, or that you and I walk through? Is that only for special people, or is there something that God is calling everybody to do that's outside of
Yeah.
their comfort zone and requires faith?
Yeah.
Because if I've got the dream house, the dream job, the dream salary, the dream whatever, don't you think it's going to be super easy to sort of lose the sense of God's leading and presence in my life?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if, yeah, maybe that's the right way to say it. You lose the sense of it. Because you have to, like, if you're too content, you know, you don't feel it. But if you are, I mean, there had to be something about those disciples that were like, I don't know, they thought the kingdom was going to be different, but they're like, this isn't the kingdom I wanted. I'm not living in the kingdom I want to live in. You know, maybe this guy can give us the kingdom. Maybe this guy can give us something.
The idea, though, if faith is what pleases God, so he's very concerned about our faith. He's very he doesn't ask us to do something or say something's of value if he doesn't have a way of helping us walk that out. So what is our journey of faith as individuals? How important is that to God? But what does the outworking of that look like?
Yeah.
You know, so you and I were always challenging people.
Yeah.
And if I'm in a spot in my life where I'm broken and you know, trying to come out of addictions, or I'm in the, you know, I've hit rock bottom, that's a relatively easy thing to see. I have a vision to be normal, or I have a vision to have a stable life. I have a vision to be healthy.
Yeah.
But once I get there, and that takes faith,
Yeah.
because I have to recreate my structure. I have to find new friends. I have to join a community. I have to join a recovery group or whatever. But what happens when you get healthy and you get there? Then what does this valuable thing of faith look like?
Yeah.
Or does God just continually just to push us beyond the boundaries and push us beyond our comfort zones? And
Yeah, I think for both of us, that's where we found real faith. I mean, I knew faith before.
yeah,
You know, when I was a garbage man, I had faith,
yeah,
but there was so much more that I didn't get. There was so much more that I was missing.
yeah.
You know.
We had faith 101.
Yeah, and I always say, like, I'm not a big fan of like theoretical altars. I just theoretically put my stuff on the altar. You know, like,
Yeah.
and it's okay. You have to, because I also have to live with this stuff. Like, I have a truck. I have to live with my truck, but my truck has to be on the. In other words, it has to be God's, or else what am I doing?
Yeah.
You know, it's my kingdom. It's my stuff. Then I'm the Lord of my life. But if Jesus is Lord of my life, then my stuff is really His. But I just think, I don't think theoretical altars work very well. I think sometimes you have to actually sell something.
Yeah.
You have to actually cash it in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
let go of it.
Yeah.
And feel it.
Right.
Like, oh,
right.
I could have used that for something else.
And that doesn't mean everything you ever have has to be sold and the money given to the church or to a missionary or something. But if there isn't some moments like that in your life, then it doesn't really mean something when you say, well, my house is really God's house. Have you ever sold it and given God the proceeds?
Yeah.
Have you ever?
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe, I don't think we're crazy. I've had several homes go through my fingers that way.
Yeah.
You know, and God, I'm like, oh, God, you've given us a home again. That first home we sold. And then He gave us another home. Like, oh, God gave us back a home. And then a little while later, like, hey, we could use that home. We could do this. And like, it's your home. I give it to you. And another one down the road is the same thing. And every time it feels a little bit crazier, because when you do it and you're 22 or 3, well, I could buy another home.
Yeah, I got
Or
time.
I could rebuild a small business that I'm running, or I can
always go back.
But it's a real sacrifice. It is. But with the older you get and then you keep doing it, you're like, no, this isn't just a one-time sacrifice. This is a way of life.
Yeah.
This is the way we're called to live our lives.
What if, though, it's good. What if the way of life thing, you just said, this is a way of life. What if God is so interested in the development of our character in our lives that we would have the fullness that Paul just described? We'd know the fullness that He's constantly giving us opportunities to stretch and grow, right?
Yeah.
So like this example you just gave of the truck or the car, I mean the house.
Yeah.
It's like the idea of generosity. I'm a generous person. I like to think that. I'm just saying in theory, let's just say
Sure.
I'm a generous person because God's been good to me. God's good all the time. So I know the rhetoric and actually I believe it at this level.
Yeah.
God is good and God supplies all my needs. And then one day God says, I want you to give $500 to this individual or this cause or what. He says, I want you to let go of $500. Well, at that point, you need, first of all, to hear that, but then you're going to have the faith to say, I'm going to actually, like you said, put this on the altar. I'm going to actually let it go, watch it go out of my hand. And I think that's that crisis.
Yeah.
That,
I'm not going to just write my bank account number on a piece of paper and burn it in a fire.
Yeah, say, right. At a campfire.
Yeah. And I make fun of that, but we've done it. We've done like nail this to a cross or burn this in a fire. It's an okay thing to do. It's a good thing to do because it's practice of doing the real thing. You know, the way of play isn't real life, but it's mimicking real life. And sometimes you've got to role play giving your stuff away in a way, or role play giving your whole life to God until you're brave enough to, I'm going to give this really away.
Yeah.
I'm going to give this isn't just a role play.
Yeah.
I'm handing this guy $500 and he's not going to give it back to me.
Yeah,
You know?
I'm letting it go. But isn't that interesting about how you can take all different facets of our lives? I want to be generous. I want to be humble. I want to be kind. I want to be loving. And in every one of those areas, that's God's desire too, because that's, hey, you're looking like me now. You're reflecting my character. But you want to be humble, so I'm going to put you in a position where you have to serve. And it's like, well, wait a minute. We used to have an experience living on the mission field where people would get in contact with us and say things like, hey, we want to come down and work with you guys for a week or 2 weeks, and we just want to serve. They would use that phrase. We just want to serve whatever you guys are doing.
Yeah.
And then they would come down and we would put them to work, say, carrying bricks or laying bricks for a church building or an orphanage or something.
That's the work that needs to be done.
Yeah, and they would be like, oh, we didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
So they're using the verbiage and not in malice, but
No.
they don't even understand what the word means yet. And so when you put it before them like, okay, now if you really want to serve, this is what needs to be done, that becomes the litmus test of whether you really want to grow.
Yeah, 100%. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, real, well, I think maybe you were the first person I heard say it. I don't remember because I've heard it for so long. But, well, what's the real test of a servant?
Yeah, it's when someone starts treating you
When
like
someone treats you like a servant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will you be a servant when you're treated
Yeah.
like one? Or like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
I want to serve on my terms.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're talking about in some ways. We do that to God. We're like, I'll give you everything. And by everything, I mean the things that I'm willing to
On
give
my
you.
terms.
Not the things that you put your hand on, the things that I'll put my hand on.
Yeah.
And that's why I always say, and I always pray for a revelation of God's value, because the Pearl of Great Price is the story that really, really got me. It really got me. The treasure in the field, the Pearl of Great Price, the concept that when a pearl merchant sees a pearl of such great value that it's worth more than everything that he has, he knows it's worth way more than what he has. It doesn't bother him so much to go home and sell everything to buy it because he knows I'm getting a bargain.
Everything shifted.
Yeah. You know, if I found out, hey, there's this house on the market, it's a $2 million house, but you can get it right now for $400,000, and all I have is $400,000. It's my whole life. It's everything. I had to cash in, sell literally everything to do it. I would sell everything to do it because, well, that's worth so much more than I'm giving.
A wonderful
I'd be
deal.
crazy not to, right? So I think that's the thing with the kingdom. If you understand its value, letting go of $500, letting go of a home, quitting a job, walking away from your nets, all those things you actually will do with a smile on your face. You're like, I can't believe the deal I'm getting. This is crazy. I can't believe he only wants everything. And he's giving me a kingdom, sonship, and eternal life.
Yeah.
I'd be crazy not to do this.
Which, by definition, everything you just described is the fullness, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you're living a partial life. God sees us from up above, sees us from another perspective.
Yeah.
Hey, you think you have the fullness, but you just have a piece. But
Yeah.
if you were to do the X, Y, and Z, it's kind of like the earlier conversation about, well, I want to have a great marriage, or I'm going to get married. Well, you have an idea of what that means, but it changes when you actually step across that line and get married, or take someone on, become a father. Well, then it challenges you in ways you never imagined, and it changes you in ways
There's
you
more
never.
cost than you thought there would be.
Yeah.
There's always more cost than you think there's going to be to marriage. That's why we do premarital.
Yeah.
There's always more cost to having a child than you think there's going to be. That's why afterwards we're like, how's it going?
Yeah, right.
You
right.
wanted this. Remember how much you prayed for this?
Yeah,
Then
but
you
there's
kinda
also more
smile.
transformation
There
than
is.
you could have ever imagined. Like
Yeah.
that you could have never achieved on your own unless you'd embrace the structure, embrace that.
So here's where I think I want to talk about this for a second. I think pastors and the modern church, at least in the West, we have such a low view of the great value of Jesus, of the revelation of Jesus. That's why we're going through Colossians, and Colossians is about the revelation of who Jesus is. We have such a low view of it that we don't preach a very good gospel because we're trying to tell you how God will make your life better.
Right.
Hey, you live in America, you've got a pretty good life, or maybe you've got some hard parts in your life. God can help you out with those hard parts in your
Yeah.
life. You know what he could do? He could come in and he could make your marriage a little bit better. You know how you're struggling with finances?
Yeah.
Well, God has the cattle on 1,000 hills. And, you know, he can actually help you through this crisis right now. You have an addiction problem? Well, you know what? God can. And the gospel is come and die. Come lay down everything that you have. Come give it all for Jesus. And in the dying, there will be a new resurrection
You're
life.
truly
You will
gonna
be
live.
born again. But you won't have your old stuff anymore. That stuff will be gone. But you'll have a new stuff, and it'll be some of it invisible stuff. It'll be kingdom stuff. But your life will be completely transformed.
Unexplainable stuff.
Walk away from your nets and follow Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think we've done a disservice, and I feel that. I feel that myself. I feel there's a temptation to preach a lower gospel that people will stay for, people will listen to, because as soon as Jesus said, "Eat my flesh and drink my blood," the crowd walked away.
Yeah.
Right? He knows. Oh, if you're here for a certain part of me. You're here for a part that gives you loaves and fishes. You love that part. And you love the good teaching. You're like, man, that was good teaching. That was great teaching. I never heard anybody teach like that. But if you really knew what I was going to ask ultimately, you would walk away, and I'll prove it by saying,
Yeah.
eat my flesh and drink my blood. And they're like, well, I'm not here for that. I'm leaving.
Yeah.
And I know I absolutely 100%, I love Youth with a Mission. They were transformative to my wife and I. When I say that we sold everything and went, that's where we went, and that's where we got our training. And I sat underneath some of the, I think, the best teachers in the world, and got some of the best gospel messages I'd ever heard. It just changed my life. I understood grace. I didn't understand grace until I went to YWAM. I didn't understand the grace of God. I was a legalist and I was religious, but I was hungry and I knew there was more. And so I went. But I think YWAM is guilty of something right now, and I've said it to many YWAMers, and I'm unafraid and unashamed to say it because I don't want it to be. But I think not everywhere, obviously, YWAM is a great organization. I just said I love it, right? But I think they've traded in some of their come and die for come and get college credits. Come and have a missions experience. Come and do this as a gap year before. And no one would say that exactly like that. No, actually they would. Some would say it exactly like that. But most know that's not exactly what you're supposed to say. But I went for the come and die. I went for the sell it all.
Yeah.
And follow Jesus into the nations, and maybe you'll never get any of it back, and maybe you'll die out here. That's what I came for. And I think there's a generation that's hungry for that, that's hungry for come and die. Because I think partially that's because they're disenfranchised with the American dream. They're disenfranchised with the culture's dream, and they see that it's hollow, and they're looking for something substantive. And if all we have to offer them is Jesus will make your life a little bit better, or come and get some extra credit before you go on to college, then I think we've shorted the gospel.
And that's the infiltration of every generation, the infiltration of the current culture good news
Yeah.
with the actual good news, I know we're going to probably run out of time,
Yeah.
but I want to read this again when Paul prays for these people that he loves. He loves these people. This is his church. He's speaking with a pastor's heart, and he's saying, man, I pray that that Christ would dwell in your hearts through faith, that you'd be firmly rooted and established in love,
Yeah.
in order that you may be strong enough to grasp together with all the saints the length, the breadth, the height, and the depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled up to all the fullness of God. And I think I'd like to leave our listeners with this idea of what is that fullness?
Mm-hmm.
What is that fullness? This mysterious something more that's out there that causes people like you to say, "Well, I want to go and die." That causes the disciples to say, "We're leaving our nets." That causes people who get glimpses of it along the way to let go
Yeah.
of money or opportunity or comfort and embrace something that on the outside doesn't seem to make any sense. And well, of course it doesn't, because it's
It doesn't.
countercultural.
Yeah. Yeah. It only makes sense to this invisible kingdom that we live in, this upside down kingdom.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for a lot of people that can't see the invisible, that don't have eyes of faith, that you're going to look crazy.
Yeah. We talked earlier just in a conversation over coffee about the Moravians, who experienced this revival and of understanding, among other things, of, hey, that we've come into a revelation and understanding about Jesus that we never saw before. And of course, it's a familiar story as they were leaving their homes and saying goodbye to families, never to return. As they went out to preach the gospel, their rallying cry was, "May the Lamb that was slain receive the reward of his suffering."
Yeah.
That only makes sense to certain people, right?
Right.
Not everybody would
Yeah.
look at that and go, "Oh,
Yeah,
that's
because they
interesting."
had a certain understanding, a certain high value of Christ and what was being offered to them. So there's worthy is the Lamb who was slain for this offering.
Yeah.
This offering that I'm giving them in my life.
It shifted the way they saw things, that in turn shifted their decisions, that literally, in a very practical sense, put them on a boat.
Yeah. What was the Lamb that was slain for? He was slain for the nations. He was slain for people. So
For the sins of the world.
something about my sacrifice should look like redeeming his reward. It should look like. I'm not just, forgive me, I'm not just giving my money to the pet shelter. He died for lost souls.
Yeah.
I'm not just, investing. He died for lost souls. So something about my sacrifice should match his sacrifice, and it should look like the redemption of lost people.
Yeah.
That my life is spent in some way, like Paul's, saying he interrupted me on a road to Damascus, where I was just doing my job and I had a good job and I was moving on up. And now I'm on a completely different mission. I'm on his mission, and his mission is redeeming lost souls. And I want to see that Moravian movement happen at Church in the Hill.
And I can't outsource this to another individual. Well, Jason, that sounds really passionate. That sounds really noble. That sounds really godly. And I'm glad that's you, because you're the lead pastor and you really should be living that kind of a life. I think we've all been given a life to live. We've all been dealt a certain hand of resources or abilities or whatever that may be. But the question that I think everybody should ask is the cause that I'm giving my life to worthy of the price that he paid to redeem me? And I think that's not a morbid question. I think that's a life-giving, door-opening question. Like, is the cause that I'm getting... Now, again, I have to work and I have to pay bills and I have to do life and I have to mow the lawn. We get all that, right? But is the core, drive of my life, is it is it congruent with the grandeur of the gospel? Is it congruent with the call, to see his kingdom come in all aspects?
I think both of us have a lot of admiration for Timothy Keller and the work that he did as pastor and as theologian, as writer, as discipler, and shaper of the church, the modern church that we see. He was pretty big figure, right? And seemed like the older he got, the more he focused his life.
Yeah.
The more he, he made statements about, he'd simplified his life down to, and again, like you say, you got to mow the lawn, you got to pay the bills. But he's like, I don't have time for the lawn anymore. So we're in an apartment. I don't want to take care of these things. That's fine if you do take care of it. But I know what I'm about. This is what I'm about. I've got X number of days left. This is what I'm gonna do with my life. And I have an appreciation for that, a deep appreciation for that. Nothing, God can give you a boat. You can enjoy that boat. You can take it on the lake. There's nothing wrong with that. But if God says, give me the boat, give him the boat, man.
Yeah.
Give him the boat.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. It is good stuff. And I've a lot to think about, a lot to pray about. But I think our greater days of sacrifice are still ahead of us. I've been saying that for a few years. I believe that's something that God told me, that my biggest sacrifices aren't behind me, they're in front of me.
You know, it's good to call to mind both the warnings and the affirmations of Jesus, where he said, what does it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his soul? So there's a warning there, you know, be careful. You can gain the whole world and lose your soul. But then when the disciples asked him, Lord, the disciples unashamedly said, Lord, we've left everything to follow you. And Jesus said, listen, no one has left, you know, home or family or fortune, I'm paraphrasing, that they will not receive both in this life and the life to come 100-fold. So Jesus promises, it's not an empty call. It's not an empty future.
Yeah.
It's a faith-filled journey, but it's not an empty destiny.
Not at all. No, if I think of the size of my life now and the size it would have been if I hadn't stepped into that kind of lordship, we'll just call it lordship, oh, my life is so much bigger, so much richer, so much more full, and all the metrics that actually matter.
Yeah.
Like maybe I would have had more if I'd stayed there. And maybe I wouldn't also, because I track friends who are on the same track as me, and they've gone through, some of them, you know, divorce or bankruptcy or struggle, and some have succeeded wildly, but you know, I'm just saying, I might have succeeded wildly, I might have failed wildly, but I can guarantee you I'm much, much richer now in all the metrics that matter for trusting Jesus with all
That's
of
the name of the next book, folks, Metrics That Matter.
metrics that matter.
Yeah.
Can we just pray?
Yeah.
Yeah, Father, we love you. You're worthy of it all, God. We sing that. We sing it and we mean it, God. You're worthy of it all. For from you all are all things, and to you are all things. You deserve the glory. Worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive the reward of his sufferings. And you were slain for us. For Bruce and I, you were slain for every single person that's listening right now. You sacrificed your own life. It wasn't just taken from you. You gave it as an offering to redeem back for yourself everyone who would believe. And that's us right now. Yeah, there's so many more who don't yet know, they don't yet believe because they don't know who you are. God, and if our sacrifices, if our offerings can in some way bring one soul to you, then it would have been cheap. It would have been a cheap purchase compared to what you gave, because you gave your very life.
Yeah.
So if we give a home or a job or a car or an evening and some time, God, and we say you are worthy of that and so much more.
Yeah.
I pray you would increase in our church a revelation of your value as we read through Colossians, as we seek you, as we worship you, God. I pray we'd have a greater revelation of how great you are, so that we would gladly pick up a cross and follow you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amen. That's
Amen.
true. So be it.
Yep.
Well, we'll see you in the week. Let us know if there's anything we can do for you, or if there's anything we can be praying about. But
Yep.
love to have you on the weekend if you're around, if you're in the Salem area.
Yeah.
If not, if there's questions, send us an email. Fire away.
Absolutely. Love you guys.
Yeah.
Bye.